not talking the country down, I'm talking him down.
You staged this bonfire! Yeah, you staged it! You staged it! Staged it! You staged it! You child abuser!
Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back!
Keir Starmer arrived at Downing Street as if he still commanded the room. The cameras clicked, the gates loomed, and for a moment he wore the expression of a man who believed the day was his to control. That illusion shattered almost instantly. A wave of hostility rolled up Whitehall, not from a handful of dissenters, but from a massed crowd whose anger carried like a storm. Their chants tore through the air, rising over the clatter of reporters and the metallic hum of police radios.
This from Hev, who says Starmer is just working at what he wants, sod the country and everyone else. He is a sneaky, backstabbing traitor to the British. Keir Starmer should be called Darth Utrendus, master of gradual betrayal and shadow deals.
The Prime Minister tried to keep his composure, walking with a fixed gaze and measured pace. But every step forward brought a sharper sting from the voices around him. The crowd surged, police officers closing in to form a human barrier. Mobile phones shot the moment from every angle, capturing a leader who only weeks before had been at ease in Parliament, now flanked by security as if navigating hostile ground. It wasn't a surprise to those who had been watching the mood in Britain harden. For days, warnings had circulated, frustration building on the streets, resentment growing inside Parliament, murmurs from within his own party. But Starmer had dismissed it, treating it like the usual background rumble of politics. Now, in front of the gates to number 10, that rumble had erupted into something far more dangerous. Raw public fury, the kind that no speechwriter could smooth over.
What the hell is the Prime Minister going on about? We're talking about illegal immigration. He wasn't given visas. He just said we've got to look at visas, which means what he's really saying is we'll open up legal routes to Eritrea. We'll open up legal routes to Afghanistan. This man hasn't got a clue. He literally hasn't got a...
It began with only a couple dozen voices on the far side of the street, a scattering of flags and homemade signs pressed against the metal barriers. At first it looked like one of the routine protests Westminster sees almost daily, but the mood was different, sharper, heavier. Within minutes, the crowd doubled, then tripled, spilling into every available space in sight of Downing Street. Placards slammed against the barricades in unison, the sound echoing down Whitehall like a drumbeat. Chants sharpened into accusations, each one aimed not at a vague political machine, but at Starmer himself. They weren't slogans designed for headlines, they were personal, biting, and delivered with the certainty of people who felt betrayed. Many of them were lifelong Labour voters, the sort who once knocked on doors and handed out leaflets for the party. Now they were shouting his name as if it were an insult.
Everything he has said this afternoon is total nonsense, obfuscation, avoiding the question. He doesn't have any answers. It's disgraceful. I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child benefit cap. He's talking about the Kremlin. He's saying everything he can to distract from the mess he is making of our economy. The OECD, Mr. Speaker, Speaker, the OECD has downgraded growth for the next 2 years. He can't rule out tax rises. The police chiefs are saying they don't have the money they need to keep the public safe. Just as he's releasing more criminals onto the streets. His cabinet are squabbling with each other. They've said that they've lost control of the borders, but he still managed, Mr. Speaker, to find £30 billion to give away the Chagos Islands. This is total and utter chaos. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos. And isn't the root of the chaos, Mr. Speaker, that it is about this Prime Minister, his decisions and his judgment?
Inside the building, Starmer's aides were already uneasy. That morning, the Commons erupted when Kemi Badenoch dismantled his credibility in full view of the nation. The footage, her relentless delivery, his strained expression, was everywhere online by lunchtime. People connected the dots. The fiery takedown in Parliament and the jeering crowd outside Number 10 were symptoms of the same fracture. They remembered his policy reversals. They remembered the broken promises. And now they had gathered in the capital to voice what many had been saying quietly for months. They were done waiting for him to live up to his words. Reporters crammed into the press pen were forced to shout just to hear each other over the noise. Microphones caught more chants than commentary, and the roar outside seemed to rattle even the most seasoned journalists. Every attempt at order from the police was drowned out by another wave of shouting, the kind that carries frustration as much as volume. Starmer's prepared statement had already been delayed twice. Each time he approached the famous black door, the uproar spiked, forcing advisers to pull him back inside. The optics were awful. Wait too long and it would look like he was hiding. Step out too soon and the images would show him being swallowed by hostility. His team huddled in a tight corner of the hallway, debating the least damaging move. In the end, they settled on speed over engagement. Starmer would make no remarks, shake no hands, and acknowledge no cameras. He would walk directly to his car under police escort, projecting an air of calm efficiency. But outside, the crowd had sensed the moment. As he emerged, the energy shifted from simmering to explosive. The first insults cut through the air, triggering a chain reaction. Placards shook violently against the barriers. A rolled-up newspaper arced through the air, hitting the pavement near his feet. Police tightened the escort, pushing him forward. The cameras caught everything. The flicker in his expression, the tension in his jaw, the shallow breath as the sound closed in around him. Near the front of the barriers, a young man lunged forward, pointing and shouting before being pulled back by officers. Just steps away, a woman held up her Labour membership card, locked eyes with the Prime Minister and ripped it clean in half. The pieces fluttered to the pavement like a symbol of something larger, loyalty shredded in public view. The cameras caught it instantly, and within hours the image would be splashed across headlines as the perfect snapshot of the day. The police quickened their pace, moving Starmer toward the waiting car. Every metre was a gauntlet, with shouts crashing down from all directions. Some protesters rattled the metal fencing until it groaned. Others simply kept repeating the same words over and over, as if hammering them into the moment. When the car door swung open, Starmer climbed in without hesitation. The door slammed, the convoy moved, but the noise didn't fade. Instead, it seemed to chase him down Whitehall, echoing between the old stone buildings. Reporters described it later as the sound of political authority leaking away in real time. Inside the vehicle, Starmer stared straight ahead. There was no celebration, no sense of escape, only the awareness that these images would play on loop for the rest of the week. For years he had tried to present himself as the unflappable figure above political theatre, but now the theatre was writing him out of the script. The atmosphere inside the Commons was already charged before Starmer even walked in. Word of the Downing Street confrontation had travelled fast, and by the time he took his seat, every MP had either watched the footage or heard a colourful version of it. Whispers passed along the green benches, a mix of smirks, raised eyebrows and knowing glances. His opponents could sense an opening, and they were lining up to exploit it. The first jab came disguised as a routine economic query. On the surface, it was about fiscal policy. In reality, It was a punch to the ribs, framed to remind the entire chamber of the chaos outside number 10. The line landed, sparking gasps and snickers, and before Starmer could steady himself, the heckling began. From the back benches, MPs tossed in barbed remarks that blurred the line between parliamentary debate and street protest. Each one was aimed at reinforcing the same image, a Prime Minister who could be rattled. The noise grew until Kemi Badenoch rose to speak, the tension in the room spiking instantly. She wasted no time with formalities. Her attack was precise, fast and relentless. Not simply criticising his policies, but dismantling the image he had built of himself as a steady, principled leader. She hammered him on free speech, on party discipline, on Brexit, immigration, and his willingness to shift positions when convenient. Every point was delivered like a hammer strike, each one echoing the chants that had filled Whitehall hours earlier. Starmer gripped the dispatch box, his face set, but the chamber could smell weakness. Badenoch's voice carried through the chamber with a rhythm that made each accusation sting. She framed him as a leader who bent under pressure, someone whose convictions shifted with the political wind. Her closing challenge wasn't a question, it was a spotlight, forcing him to confront why so many outside were echoing the same anger that had now seeped inside Westminster's walls. The room fell into a brief, heavy silence. It wasn't respect that kept it still, but anticipation. Every MP present knew the exchange would be clipped, replayed and dissected before the evening news was even finished airing. Some on the opposition benches leaned back in their seats, satisfied, while a few Labour MPs looked distinctly uneasy, as if they too felt the sting of the truth in her words. When Starmer finally responded, the words were measured, but the energy in the room had shifted. His answers sounded rehearsed against the raw edge of what had just been thrown at him. Every statistic he cited, every promise he repeated, felt like paper armour against a barrage of live ammunition. From that point on, the session became a feeding frenzy. Question after question dug into the very topics he least wanted in the spotlight: immigration reversals, Brexit contradictions, party discipline failures. The chamber was no longer debating policy, it was picking apart the character of the man leading the country. By the time Starmer left the chamber, the story had already escaped into the wild. Newsrooms across the country were cutting together split-screen footage, Badenoch's Commons takedown on one side, the Downing Street booing on the other. It was the kind of visual pairing no political strategist could survive unscathed. Social media timelines flooded with clips, hashtags and memes before the Prime Minister's motorcade had even cleared Westminster. Commentators from both ends of the political spectrum found rare agreement. This was the worst day of his premiership. The debate wasn't about the details of policy anymore. It was about whether he could still command the authority to lead. In Labour strongholds, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Local activists who had once campaigned door-to-door for him were openly questioning if they could defend him to voters. Conversations in pubs, workplaces and community halls carried a sense of betrayal. For many, the issues weren't abstract, they were tied to broken promises on jobs, wages and living costs. Conservatives pounced, framing the moment as proof that Labour was fracturing. Nigel Farage added fuel with a prime-time broadside, painting Starmer as a man without convictions who had finally been exposed. The clip racked up millions of views, amplifying the sense that this was no longer just a bad day's news cycle, but the start of a bigger political unravelling. The protests outside Downing Street were only the beginning. Within days, they were mirrored in cities across the country: Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle, each erupting with its own surge of placards, chants and defiance. These weren't fringe agitators, but the people who had once formed Labour's backbone. Union members, lifelong voters, campaigners who had knocked on doors for decades. Now they stood in the rain and under streetlights, accusing the man they helped elect of abandoning every promise he had made. Each shouted pledge, from Brexit commitments to cost of living relief, landed like a public indictment. The media turned the spread into a story of collapse. Headlines grew sharper with every edition. Talk shows looped his most humiliating moments, and political commentators spoke in the tones usually reserved for leaders in their final days. Inside Labour HQ, the atmosphere was suffocating. Advisers argued over desperate strategies. But every option risked further damage. New clips surfaced hourly, feeding hashtags and headlines that kept the storm alive. By the end of the week, one image came to define it all. Not from Parliament nor the gates of Number 10, but from the crowd itself. A former Labour councillor, once a vocal supporter, breaking through the press line to deliver one last accusation. Starmer didn't reply. He simply turned away, stepping into the car as the chants rose once more. And as the motorcade slipped into the night, one question lingered in every headline, every broadcast, every conversation. Could his leadership survive what had just begun?